Om Shanti, and welcome to Soul Cafe, to those on Zoom as well as YouTube. Today we have a lovely interview. So these are similar to the Raja Yoga interviews that we have on Tuesdays, but as usual, we'd like to begin with a meditation. So inviting you to sit comfortably, and lovely to experiment with the eyes open. And the image in front of you can be a point of focus, but can also just emerge a certain feeling inside, a feeling of stillness. A feeling of being grounded. And regardless of an individual's walk of life, their background, religion, country, language, that feeling of being grounded, of being still inside, where the feelings feel stable, they feel light, the feelings feel free, the mind and heart feels free. These are universal feelings. And it reveals so much more about what connects all of us together. Beneath the image that we see in the mirror, the gender, the age, the culture, religion, any of these labels, these identities, there is a sense of being that everyone seeks for. It is a universal feeling because every individual is in fact the being behind the image, the roles. And everyone is looking for that true experience of peace. That feeling of feeling grounded. That feeling of lightness. Because in fact, everyone is a soul. And that feeling of peace is the true nature of who we are. And when peace is real, when that feeling within is full, how I see the world, how I see myself, how I interact, how I be in every situation, is naturally benevolent, respectful. There's natural harmony. This world was originally a place of harmony. Interactions that were naturally filled with peace. And we look for that kind of world. We remember that it must have been much more than what it is, as it is now. So peaceless and filled with sorrow. And it begins with me, of how I feel, how I see myself, how I be at every moment. How I identify is the seed of everything. Om Shanti. Om Shanti. So welcome. It's a beautiful topic that we have for our interview today. And for those of you who do join for the interviews on the Tuesdays, we usually have a slogan that we explore. Today, it's a beautiful, it's not a slogan, but it's a beautiful statement. And it'd be beautiful if I could read it out for souls. And then we will actually also invite soul we are interviewing. So here is we call it a blessing. And maybe we'll ask our guest here about what a blessing means too. So, may you move forward by having truth and manners in your heart, in your words, and in your behavior, and become an embodiment of success. Constantly remember that the sign of truth is manners. If you have the power of truth, you would never let go of your manners. You may prove something to be the truth, but do it with manners. The sign of manners is humility, and the sign of not having manners is stubbornness. When your words and behavior are expressed with manners, you will be successful. This is the way for you to move forward. If you have truth but no manners, you cannot achieve success. And certainly many resonate with a certain kind of personality, a standard even within themselves of how they conduct themselves. So we are going to invite our guest here. Welcome, Judy.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.
I might suddenly fly out of the screen, but I'll always fly back in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yours is a little worse.
So we've had an interview with Judy about a month ago, and that was a very powerful meeting because she is in a very real place. And so we had an interview about just spirituality and reality. And I would say that this is still a very relevant topic, because when it comes to spirituality and just how we are in day-to-day situations, I know that this particular blessing really resonated with you, Judy. I'm not sure if you wanted to share a bit more about your thoughts.
Yeah. I think that I don't know if you wanted to. I'm back. So it's not a stable internet. You had mentioned wanting to talk about a blessing in general.
Yeah, that would probably be a good place to start.
Okay.
Where does this come from all of a sudden, this blessing?
Yeah. So in terms of what a blessing means in general, we're used to the idea of just asking for blessings from someone. And there isn't necessarily any effort on my part. I just want to receive a blessing. And we never really think through, and then what? So I get the blessing, but things could go kind of in a funny direction again. So do I just keep asking for blessings, or how does that work? So I like the way the blessing is sort of framed in Raj Yoga, where it's actually empowerment. So the blessing is always structured that if you do this particular effort or practice, then this will be the result. And we see this actually in fitness, where people are trying very hard, but if they could just correct what they're doing, refine what they're doing, the results would be far more than they ever could have imagined. And it's not magic or anything. It's just the result of being accurate, is to get multifold results from it. So that's kind of the feeling with the blessings in Raj Yoga, is if I do a particular effort, the results will be, they will seem almost magical, but they're simply the natural result of doing it accurately. So they're very empowering, which means it's sustainable. It's not just I get a momentary, shift because I asked for blessing and then I have to go and ask for them again and again, but that I actually now will have a sustainable shift because I blessed myself. I did a particular effort that created this incredible result.
And for those who joined for any programs on site and perhaps for some of the programs as well as online, you may have noticed that you get blessing cards actually. And so, the blessing cards are basically in this manner as well. And so before we go into this particular blessing, there was a lovely example you actually gave one time. And I'm not sure if you remember, you were trying to do a handstand, or maybe it wasn't a handstand, but there was someone that who was teaching you, or you were asking them, maybe it was doing a handstand, and they just said, just do it. And to me, it reminded me about, being able to empower yourself. Could you share a little more just in terms of the relevancy? Because this word blessing, it can be used very specifically in certain religions, certain faiths. And then, but for others, this is sort of a bit out of context too for them.
Yeah, I think the suggestion, or what's implied, is that we have tremendous capacities and potentials as souls. They are completely untapped. I think we would surprise ourselves with our capacities, but they're completely untapped because we're not in the right alignment. We're not spiritually aware. So, similarly, I've seen in fitness that there's incredible potential there and capacity, but because we're not in the right awareness, it might be a lack of self-belief or the wrong attitude, we don't tap into that capacity. Even today, it was really funny. I was working with a client, and I've shared before, I'm sure, we work on these cartwheels, and they can do one side leading with one hand, but the other side is just strange. It just completely falls apart. I know the capacity is there. So it's all something to do with, it's a spiritual thing. Whenever you talk about the non-physical aspects of our functioning, such as attitude or overcoming fear, you're looking at spirituality. So today, yet again, trying to give cues, and it's really just about self-trust. And so we would give some cues, but we also say, let's try it again, and you can think about technical things, but that's a very limited approach. It's what sort of spiritual cue did the soul need to unlock that capacity that is there? And that's really the approach to blessing we're looking at, is that we have a huge capacity that's untapped. What spiritual cue, what spiritual alignment or method can I be given that will tap into that, unlock it? And it will feel like a blessing for the self, because the returns are so magical, really. Mm-hmm. I think we surprise ourselves. So that was definitely the experience I had in the example you're speaking of, is the trainer was asking me to do something. It was a one-legged squat while holding, a pistol squat while holding. The names of it are horrible. It's either duck or shoot the duck or pistol squat. Both are horrible names. I don't even like to say them, but one-legged squat while holding a medicine ball. And he showed it, and it's effortless. And every time I did, I'd go down, fall over, and wouldn't come back up. So I thought, I said, can you give me some mechanical hints here? And he opened his mouth as if he was about to, and he stopped himself. He said, just believe he can. That was the only cue he gave me, because he could see there was the capacity, but there was a spiritual blockage. Mm. So in Raj Yoga, the blessings acknowledge these spiritual blessings. They give us that spiritual cue that will unlock the capacities in the soul. And it will feel like I've just blessed myself. I've got this incredible return. It's massive. But now I've developed a skill. I've developed a source of self-mastery. So the point was, at the end of the day, you won't need blessings. You won't need to ask for blessings, right? It will just be this self-mastery. Excuse me.
So just for souls to know that you might notice where Judy is, she's actually in the hospital. And so the last time we had a lovely interview, it was really, as I mentioned, about spiritual and reality. And this is very relevant for today's theme in terms of truth and manners, because when it comes to just how we are in day-to-day situations, souls really want to be able to be their best at every given moment. But I get this feeling that sometimes it can feel very exhausting for many. And I love this blessing. When I first heard it, it was just so powerful, very inspiring. And so for yourself, there was something you shared, but we'll go back to that in terms of capacity. So what is the relationship in terms of soul consciousness and just, manners? It's interesting. There used to be schools where you actually are taught manners. But what is this about manners? Because I don't know how many really even think about, the importance of manners now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely. Traditionally in schools, you were given marks for character or virtue. And that's not really, I see a little bit, they'll have the virtue of the month and the school, etc. But this was really, in fact, the soul I'm visiting right now was the proctor at their school. So they were given the responsibility of keeping an eye on the character of the other students who were the same age as them. It was quite funny because there was such a focus day to day on character. But it was so funny, your question, because as I arrived the site where I am now, as I arrived, I was thinking deeply about this blessing, because I just think it is the essence of dignity, which makes us very happy when we move through the world with dignity. We're so at peace with the self, suggesting that is the original state of the soul. And we feel just such well-being, such alignment when we move in that state. So I was thinking about the blessing, and the method suggested in the blessing is truth. Truth starts with the truth about the self. I am a soul. So as I walked into the building, I'm thinking, experiencing, not just thinking, but experiencing, okay, I am a soul, and having the big picture, all of these aspects of truth and how they translate into a certain character that's not reactive, but still very accurate. And it was so ironic that as I got to the elevator, there is signage here that only 4 people are allowed in the elevator at a time. It's very common now. And so I arrived, and it was a bit confusing because usually you have to wait a while, but there was an elevator and the doors were opening and it was going up. But I sort of peeked my head in. I saw that there were already 4 that have gone in. So I stepped aside, and I literally was almost knocked over by someone who was running to get into the elevator. And so they kind of pushed me aside and went into the elevator. And I'd had this blessing in my mind. And so I thought, this is wonderful. This is a chance to practice the blessing. I remember that feeling. Normally someone might say, what are you doing? There's already 4 in there and you just jumped the queue. Like, what's going on? And I remember it was just like this incredibly calm feeling. I do not want to, as we say, let go of my religion, if you will, my dignity. If there's going to be other elevators, it's fine. And actually, ironically, it was so confusing. Ironically, the next elevator beside it, this was so fun, was already opening up again to go up. So I walked in, and as it turned out, the soul that had rushed past me was going to the same floor. So as the elevator opened, I come up, and again, she almost knocks me over. And she comes bouncing out of her elevator, and I was laughing at this point. So, sorry, go ahead.
She has a sign saying, I am helping you to understand.
I am your lesson plan today. It was so fun. So it's really, but again, I was reflecting that, there is a perfection, of course, in every scene, but this has been the deepest lesson I've had in the last few weeks of how do you maintain dignity? Uh-oh.
I don't know if it's, I
have to plug in. I'll be right back.
So I guess I should fill in while she actually, no, I won't fill in. I'm going to ask if there's any questions. If anyone there has questions, I'll have to answer them until Judy comes back. Any thoughts at all? It was such a powerful blessing. Mm-hmm.
Om Shanti. Yeah, with this experience of being in my spiritual state, when I heard or experimenting with blessings, I feel that I am a giver. When you are in your natural stage, not the normal stage where people's expecting from you, or so because you are in that natural state of calm and self-respect, you are able to create that very elevated vibrations, and that can resonate and be a blessing as well to other people. So I feel like I am a giver more than a receiver. So yesterday, I would say it's a blessing. I honestly messed up with my schedule. So there's one meeting after another, and there's only 2 minutes before I start with my low kick work. And I had only 15 minutes, of time to drive there, and I was really late. So instead of, feeling stressed, so I called the low kick supervisor. But before that, I created that calmness and stillness, that everything will be okay, and it's gonna be fine. Someone will cover up. And actually, when I call, because I created that stage, it was calm. They say like, Pauline, it's okay. And there was this self-respect within me that I don't need to really feel bad about myself because of the multitasking and the scheduling that I would say confused with. But when I came, everything was fine. And actually, it turned out that one of the clients canceled, and she was able to cover up, and everything seems to be smooth. And I feel like that's a blessing that I created in my inner stage of my natural stage that I share to everyone. So being a giver. And that's the truth about me, the natural stage, not the normal stage of the worldly stuff that's going on. So Shanti.
Yeah, you're sharing because you were mentioning about soul consciousness, and I know that was a part of the question that we had about when there is that state of soul consciousness. And it was reminding me about Judy's interesting scene in the drama about the elevator, that even whoever that soul was, it couldn't even possibly feel bad, just what happened. But when you're in your stage, it can also accommodate others and where what's going on with them. So
yeah, and I know that there was a class last night that explored this blessing a little bit with one of the senior students, and I really appreciated it. This idea that, because you still want, I have to be in a true state and also promoting what is truthful, because there's a benevolence in that. And this is probably one of the top questions that we get. What does correction look like? And the blessing goes on to say, to talk about not to be harsh or bossy, that the idea of helping things to go in an accurate direction without a loss of manners, right? Sometimes it's a little different than accommodating, but really, I'm still responding, I'm still acknowledging, and perhaps even having to correct, but there's not a loss of manners, because we always want to promote what is benevolent. And it's a very sensitive thing, because on the other side, we are respecting, very little correction is needed because everyone's doing what they need to do, and we don't know what's going on in their story. So it's a very, but there are certain within, just as an example, within the Raj Yoga organization, there are certain spiritual guidelines and policies we have that support a healthy environment. And I think many of us have been in organizations where you'll see there's signage on the wall, or guidebooks, policy books, because we're in a shared experience. We're not alone, we're in a shared experience. There has to be some sort of structure that ensures that remains a healthy environment. So they were acknowledging that, and that's really how do we ensure that that healthy environment is sustained while still acknowledging there's individuality, but there's certain core principles that have to be maintained. It is I say it is one of the top issues right now, because now with internet, we've had several conversations about this in the fitness industry. Had several conversations about this in the fitness industry because we have souls, the online training has exploded. So you've got people maybe not having their video on who are joining your presentation online, your class online, and you have no idea really sometimes what they're doing or the accuracy of what they're doing. And what is your responsibility as really, an advocate of health and well-being? We've had to explore what insurance will look like in this kind of environment. So it gets very interesting, and we notice that it's now even more difficult to maintain certain principles of movement that keep things healthy, safe, and productive. And so the same with spirituality. It's so available online. The core principles that actually enable one to progress aren't necessarily being observed because it's online, right? So you're in the privacy of your home. Very different from how things originally started with this study. So what's that fine line of acknowledging everyone has their story, everyone is in a different place, but it's a shared journey as well. And how do we maintain that accuracy with the dignity, with the manners? And I think those who are in a very strong stage of soul consciousness can actually support that without saying a word. Just their vibration actually really helps souls to keep a little eye on themselves. It's a very interesting topic now.
Yeah, you were sharing about soul consciousness, and I was thinking about that as well during Pauline's sharing about there's an aspect of a very specific stage of peace, because we hear the word peace, and I think we can certainly have different experiences of what that really means. But when you had shared about that experience of soul consciousness, you were in that feeling of the bigger picture of things as well. And how does that enable you to be able to maintain, we say manners, dignity, or a certain way of being able to interact that where you're responding instead of reacting?
Yeah, I think, again, coming full circle, there are these capacities within the soul. Sometimes you call them powers or arts of life, or even the greatness of the human spirit. These capacities, and they're there in every human soul. They're there. The only way to unlock them is through understanding I'm a soul, not thinking about it, not being interested in it, not doing, but actually experiencing I am a soul is the key. And then what really helps to ensure that that gets strengthened, reinforced, and anything else starts to melt is, of course, our connection to God. So without those two, I know we love to jump to manners. That's what made that blessing so interesting. Is we just jump to manners and think we're soul conscious. But it will become extremely heavy and unpredictable after a while if it isn't based on soul consciousness. This happens all the time. Souls just jump right to, I'm going to be very mannered, I'm going to be very nice, I'm going to be very patient, but there's no soul consciousness. I mean, they say they're soul conscious, but I wonder if we can confuse soul consciousness with the virtue.
I wonder.
We wouldn't do that in a fitness class. We wouldn't confuse the push-up with activating our core. Right? They're two distinct things. I need to activate my core to do the push-up. And I do that before I do the push-up. But I think it's a lot easier to blur in spirituality.
It's a great example. You wouldn't mistake in just activating your core as push-up. And because it seems quite clear, it does feel like spirituality. I wouldn't say it's not clear, but because so much of it is so subtle, to be able to have a sensitivity of what is it that's driving how I basically, what's going on in my inner world and how that drives my decisions and therefore just how I behave.
Yeah, I think, again, I had a long conversation with souls about this. There are certain building blocks of movement, and then there's the movement itself. So there's things like mobility or range of motion, flexibility, core stability. They're all very invisible. They're not glamorous, as they're not the usual glamorous stuff, but they're the foundation, the building blocks. And there's some souls who like to do that just for the sake of doing it. They just love to do it. They would do it even if it never moved on to anything else. They love to do that kind of stuff. They love to do the subtle, invisible internal work. They enjoy it. It's a very interesting thing. It's not everyone's cup of tea. We over and over find these are the lowest attended classes. We just canceled one because the attendance was so low.
Mm-hmm.
So to enjoy it for the sake of itself, that I enjoy practicing soul consciousness. I love how it feels. I feel when I'm connected to God as well. To just enjoy these, I think, is a big sign that I won't get the two confused.
Mm-hmm.
Because I understand that out of this practice, the other stuff will naturally come. And they'll come accurately. And I think that's a really important point, that we have our own idea of what it is to be tolerant or patient or compassionate. And usually desires are mixed in there somewhere. It's not that really pure form of that virtue, which we call divine.
Mm-hmm.
So that will happen naturally. We always say it's from the purity is the mother of all virtues. Purity is based on truth, or if you will, moving out of desires, moving beyond desires. So if I just focus on that piece and enjoy doing that, the other stuff will happen naturally. So I really have to enjoy it for the sake of enjoying it. We've noticed that those who do are naturally pulled to things like early morning meditation, the perfect time to practice soul consciousness. They just are pulled to it very naturally. They love it for the sake of doing it itself.
Now, when you were sharing, actually, I was thinking about even just my inner matters of just how I am with myself. And sometimes we think of manners and we're always just thinking about, just how we interact with others. And yeah, of course, or how we deal with situations on a very overt level. But how about when it comes to the self? Like because it's quite interesting, because that's where it seems to all start. So let's say I make a mistake. Yes, I love the basics, but this is a lovely study where you're not hiding in a closet. You are constantly, you're right now in the hospital, right? You constantly have to be practicing spirituality. And I think that happens everywhere we are. So when you make a mistake, what has your experience been like in terms of, soul consciousness, just the basics of the study of how you are with yourself when you make a mistake?
So in essence, soul consciousness is telling me who and what I am and who and what I am not. And that's very important to experience. We're not even getting into virtues yet. We're just who and what I am and who and what I'm not. So as it turned out yesterday, I did make a mistake in terms of reacting. Now, I could have gone into a bunch, this is why I like the slogan today as well. I could have gone into a bunch of excuses. Well, this happened because this, and this was going on. I could have done that, but I wasn't interested because now I know who I am. So when I make a mistake, I acknowledge it. Everything now is coming from self-respect. I acknowledge it. There's absolutely no desire or interest in blaming anyone or anything else. Zero.
Is there a possibility of blaming yourself too, then?
I have to understand myself. I find that far more interesting, which is why soul consciousness is useful. It gives me an understanding of myself. I understand how this happened, and I understand what I'm capable of. Both of those, right? So there's compassion. I get how this happened. So that's what I need to focus on now. I need to pay attention to that. I also know that I am capable of so much more. So it's because of soul consciousness. We don't have a clue of our capacity without soul consciousness. Zero idea of what we're capable of in terms of the bigness of the heart. No idea. We now have senior students in front of us who give us a glimpse of what is possible because they've been studying this. And it's just remarkable how much they can stretch.
I'm reminded of just how much we need to be on, on in terms of not a show, but in terms of just our awareness. And I was thinking again, I enjoy these parallels with physical fitness, but when it comes to the core, I don't think we realize that we're constantly using the core when we walk and move around, because it seems, I would say, for the typical person who's relatively healthy, their core is on and it's rather effortless. So, but I was thinking about that because Hema, another participant who's joined, we had this lovely conversation a while back about it's in the mundane moments where we don't pay attention. And it's in those moments where sometimes I find that we have lots of interesting situations where we really do realize, do we have our spiritual core on?
Yeah, there's a joke in fitness as well that it's not during the glamorous moments, it's during the very mundane. I was just walking down the street, and suddenly I'm in a cast the next day and people ask you, how'd you do this? And you want to say, oh, I was doing a 180 on it. No, I was just walking down the street. It is these very mundane moments of not paying attention where accidents can happen. And so definitely, again, it was beautiful to get this lesson as well, the subtle checking. I actually want to check on quite subtle or close to the seed level. I don't want to be checking once it becomes quite far down the road. I need to be checking my attitudes, my awareness, my thoughts all the time, right? Because yes, you could suddenly come to an elevator and someone runs past you. It was very interesting. That scene was what was happening just before that I found interesting. What was I doing just before? Was my core, the type of internal activity reflecting on soul consciousness, and so what state was I in when that scene happened? That was far more interesting to me. So we need to develop the habit of paying attention, which requires slowing down a lot.
It's interesting that it's about paying attention, because some do find that Raja Yoga is difficult. So is it difficult, or is it that our attention isn't constant, which of course is true, but we also mistaken that with just really trying really, really hard?
It is, and I think obviously it needs to be, if you will, your cup of tea. It needs to be something like, if I'm in fitness, I'm going to find certain things quite difficult because I'm not really meant to do them. I'm not really built to do them, right, physically. So I think that's important to acknowledge, that we need to find that which really speaks to us, or the approach to it that really speaks to us. I think at the end of the day, everybody needs to acknowledge that they are spiritual beings. So then the difficulty is that I'm quite deeply attached to something else. And one of my favorite moments in a fitness class, and it's so connected to spirituality, is, they'll work so hard through the whole class. They're just doing all sorts of crazy high intensity training. And then they get to the end and they're stretching, and then they're lying on the ground in what we call Shavasana. They're just prone. You say, okay, now we're going to do the most difficult thing in the class. We're going to ask you to let go. That is probably the most challenging thing for people to do now. And that is all that Raj Yoga constantly asks us to do. Spirituality constantly asks us to let go. And that is by far the most challenging thing for us to do. And it's ironic that letting go, souls want to let go, they want freedom, but ironic that that's so challenging. So that's often what's so difficult. So then we have to really focus on what would be the attainment of letting go, and have a conversation about that. What's in it for me in letting go, and really start to, as we used to say, the intellect convincing, helping us convince us what's the benefit of letting go. And that needs to be very meaningful and real, and that will help a lot. Mm-hmm. We were joking that that we had a presentation on functional aging, and I was just joking, wow, if people were in this presentation, they would be frightened into changing their approach to fitness when they could hear that what they're doing is actually damaging themselves and where it's leading. They would be frightened. They would have strong motivation to change, to let go of that. Mm-hmm.
There's something about the blessing that I was thinking about as well. And, it's just flown right out of my mind. But so perhaps maybe when it comes back into my mind, I'll just check in if there are any questions from anyone, those on YouTube, those on Zoom. Go ahead, Pauline.
So for those souls who hasn't had that truth within themselves emerge, their natural nature, what is the role of conscience, when it comes to conducting, in a spiritually mannered way? So, conscience per se, without feeling guilty or being honest and having that pure intention.
It's a great question. I often felt this was Daddy Genki, who was one of our more recent spiritual heads. I often felt at her heart, this was her greatest concern for people, was the conscience. That she was quite concerned. She was a bit like a spiritual X-ray machine, and she could see and feel the heaviness. The heaviness comes from committing crimes against our highest potential. This sits very heavy inside of us. And yes, how can we start to turn that around without the guilt or shame, but still taking responsibility? I'd say that's the essence of what Raj Yoga is exploring. Is I have to start to engage in activities that will start to turn that around. I've got to stop doing things that are, yes, fighting inside. And that happens to every human soul. It comes a point when it's quite intolerant. So then I start to focus outwards, and I'll have very low tolerance. I'll be very intolerant of everything around me. And eventually I'll turn to victim consciousness. But to really be able to take that responsibility, and this again is where soul consciousness is critical. Soul consciousness is telling me two things. It's telling me this is what you're capable of. This is why your conscience is fighting, is you're going against your true nature. This is what you're capable of. But this is the reason that you're not able to do it right now. So let's heal that so that you can return back to operating in your true and honest way. You can have a clean heart. And, I often compare it to elite athlete who, could run 100 meters in sub 10 seconds, under 10 seconds. So they have that memory now inside of being able to run very fast. So they know they have this physical capacity. But then they may have, somewhere along the line, they pull a hamstring or they break a leg. So they start to just feel kind of depressed about the whole thing because they have a memory of running very fast. But we can't ask them to do that. We can't say, come on, run. That's ridiculous to shame them. They can't right now. We have to, okay, you have this capacity, but right now you need to heal. So here's the program you need to engage in right now with your vision on restoring that capacity. Maybe I pulled the hamstring or broke the leg due to ego, who knows, so I need to acknowledge that so that would be part of the program of healing, that I don't keep doing that. I don't keep re-injuring, right? I need to address that in the program. So, because I really won't be at peace with myself until I heal back to my original state. So this is really what's sitting in the conscience, right? Is I go against my pure, highest potential. This is what's happened to everyone. This is why we're so fascinated looking outside at what everyone else is doing wrong, right? We become really, like, it's incredible how critical we are and how much we judge other people. It's a really useless activity. It doesn't get me any further ahead. It actually makes me feel worse. It makes my conscience feel worse, because that's also going against my true nature, which is very benevolent, which is very uplifting of others. So why am I doing that? Because I don't want to look at myself. There's all the worth of the self is gone. The only way I can feel better is if I push someone else down. That's not going to make us feel better. That goes against our true nature. So the sign that someone actually is starting to take that response, starting to be able to benefit themselves, is they're less and less critical and judging of others. We try and go at it directly. Oh, I have to be less critical and judging of others, but I'm not increasing I haven't done the healing of improving my worthiness, because I want things to be a natural result of the inner work, not in replacement of the inner work, if that made any sense.
Good question. Hema, you have a question?
No, Julven, could you please repeat, because what did you say the last few sentences?
Yeah, just this idea of ultimately it's inner work that needs to happen inside of us. And I don't want, and the conscience is definitely a part of that. Daddy Janky used to talk about cleaning the chit, the memory track, having a clean heart. So these are all aspects of addressing that heaviness. We use the phrase, there's a burden of sin on our head. This is the phrase that we use, this heaviness that's sitting inside, that's really leading to a lot of distortion of our behavior. And I want to do some inner healing work, have the right method to do that, that will naturally, the sign that I am restoring the self-worth is that I am less judging and critical of others. But I don't want to just start to try and be less judging and critical of others without doing the inner work. The less judging and critical of others is a natural result of doing the inner work. So I don't want it to replace the inner work. I want to do it in the right order. That I do that inner work of restoring the worth of the self, and I'll notice, oh look, I'm less judging and critical of others. It's very natural. But sometimes we try and do it and it's very laborious.
Would you say that one does then have to be really a detached observer of yourself as you're doing the inner work, that there's all this other stuff that just keeps rolling around, the reactivity inside them?
Yeah, and soul consciousness is detached observer. Any which way you slice it, soul consciousness is the starting point of any real accurate spiritual study, because it's spiritual. So I have to be spirit. So yes, if I am soul conscious, I will find, oh look, I'm becoming a detached observer of my own inner workings. I can see it with far greater clarity. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Hema, did you have another question?
No, that was my question, as you were asking that what is inner work. So that is a soul consciousness. So I think that's the answer, right? Because that part is very difficult.
And it's interesting because I was thinking this very much so just before the Soul Cafe about, there are things that I think for each particular soul it seems to be the same habits that keep coming up, and I think, do we know how to manage ourselves? Do we just keep saying stop it, stop coming up, or do we actually manage ourselves properly? And my question that I thought I had forgotten was actually, I was reminded about that in terms of reactivity. Why is it that we feel reactive all the time? Like it constantly feels like we're threatened by something. And it was reminding me, I know this is a very bad analogy, but if anyone has watched the Superman movies, and Lex Luthor is constantly obsessed with gaining land. Everyone knows it's constantly about gaining land. And I found that very significant because in the study, it's really about, are you able to access the land of peace and the land of liberation in life? Like, and it's not a physical thing. It's like your position. Where do you stand internally? And so I was thinking about, manners in terms of, why do we react? Do we basically base our sense of self-worth based on the situations around us? And so we react when at any time it feels like as if that feeling of stability or everything is okay has been threatened.
Yeah, and the study seems to create two categories, or there seems to be two approaches to the study, or it boils down to two approaches. One we call battling, and the other is, and it's funny, success was in the blessing that you read, but one is really attaining, easily attaining. We even say easy Raj Yoga, easily attaining. So there's battling or there's ease. And it really has to do to whether or not I can sort out, I need to get the foundation, and that's internal. It's got nothing to do with anything else. I've got to stop. My outward expression needs to improve. That's my objective, absolutely. But I need to focus on the inner state. And one of the words we use for land is actually state, as in United States of America. It's a state of being. I need to just keep focusing on the state of being. Is it spiritual? And let that, so it's the order. If I focus, if I understand the principles, if I follow the directions, which are all about the state of being, the expression will happen naturally. And that's called easy Raj Yoga. If I find I'm reversing it, I might not even notice I'm doing it. I'm constantly focusing on the outward expression, which gets me all entangled in the outward anyways. But if I'm constantly focusing on that, the outcome of the outward expression, and not getting the order right, I will be battling. I will be battling a lot. Things will be quite difficult because I'm not actually using the method. So always, and I've noticed this with very, very successful athletes, it requires incredible liberation from ego to do this, but very successful athletes have no problem going to zero weight, like no weights, going right to the basics. They love it. Very, very basic training. They keep going back to the basics, the foundation. They know that there's really no point. I will not get full benefit. It will be a battle, and it will have a limit. So they're very strong in their basics. My favorite athletes happen to be body weight athletes. They do a lot of body weight work. I can see them. They can lift very, very heavy. But it's really of no interest. It's not what they focus on. They focus so much on what we call calisthenics or body weight. And it's ironic because many of them actually start to become holistic. There's a very reflective side to them, because to be they often are meditators. It's really strange, because to focus on body weight requires incredible attunement to the subtle. And that's the same skill you need in spirituality. So that, again, loving the basics for the sake of loving the basics, then it becomes easy Raj Yoga. So we have to really take care. There's lots of resources available online now, lots and lots, and that's such a fortune. But I never want it to usurp my practice of the basics. More does not necessarily mean better. Deeper does mean better. So I could be exposing myself to lots of information and not taking in any of it deeply, rather than I focus on a little, very simple, but I give myself the time to experience it deeply, staying with the basics. That's really important.
Thank you, Judy. There's just one final thought. It really feels like we're getting to be comfortable with experiencing the subtle and comfortable with the quality of that, because I do feel it's about the foundation again. It is very easy to sort of lose that. I have so many other questions. It would be so great, but I think we are running out of time.
Yes, and I regret I must fly.
Yeah.
It's going to go offline here, but thank you so much for
Thank you, Judy.
tolerating the insanity here. And
No, we are living reality. All right, thank you, Judy.
until next time, Om
Thank
Shanti.
you. So, any final thoughts before we have a little reflection? Everyone's good, and I'm looking at everyone. Yes, Emma.
I was just wondering why are we critical and why we are so judgmental about others. I was just sometimes thinking, because I don't have what they have, or I cannot do because what they are doing. Sometimes I really wonder that why do I need to be very critical? Why do I need to be very judgmental? I mean, we know that it's not good at all, but still, I know it's very subtle and deep actually.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things I was thinking about, and of course, both of you have taken the Raja Yoga course, but we can't assume that those who are watching have. But as you know, that as souls, we go through a journey at our highest state. It's very natural for us to be benevolent, to be full, to be free, and to be very non-reactive. That's not even a question at all to begin with. But at the point of time, when we go through half our journey and we start to forget ourselves, there is a memory of that greatness. Specifically at that time, we call it the Copper Age. At that time is this memory of this high standard. That is actually when laws actually started to try to, first of all, with ourselves, we become quite lawful with ourselves, but there is no purity in the sense that we're losing access to the integrity. We still have some of it left, that there is this memory that we'll be able to at least control ourselves, that there's a memory of this very high standard. So then we start to put these so-called boundaries within ourselves, put boundaries within myself to make sure that I'm keeping with that standard that I still have in my memory. And there is, I didn't realize this, but there's a well-known philosophy out there that's called Stoicism. And I'm not sure, someone else has shared about it, but it was so much about manners, so much about character. And at that time in the Copper Age, we still have a lot of power. So these laws are in place, but at the same time, it's pretty easy for us to be able to do that. It's like even right now, you can think about it for yourself. There are certain standards within yourself that we call it no-brainer. You wouldn't even question, right? And there are some really extreme things that, but that might not necessarily be the case with everyone. Now, those are the extreme things or more obvious things. But when it comes to the more subtle things, you'll notice that, it kind of becomes quite gray in terms of what is your standard, what is my standard. But because we now have this habit in the previous birth of creating these laws internally first, and then it becomes external. And at the same time, there's one aspect of Raja Yoga that we learn is that we have actually lost the awareness that we are actually all brother souls. We still have this memory of perfection, but we actually are expecting each other to be able to be at their highest state. In this study, it's like we expect each other to be fathers, right? We're not looking at each other that we're all in the same boat, we've lost ourselves, but we actually look at it as a fatherhood. It's actually a very deep aspect, right? And there's these really subtle habits that have accumulated from previous births. And we may not realize it. I'm not sure if you notice that there are certain things that are, in this phrase in the West called pet peeves. Have you heard of the word pet peeves? Like,
What is that?
This word pet peeve? It's a phrase in the West where they say the things that really bother you. There are certain things that really bother you. Don't bother other people, but really bother you. But it's likely because of an accumulation from previous births. But ultimately, you're asking the question, why do we become critical of others? Which is why, that question had come up about, this obsession with territory and land. It seems like it's a physical thing. I was using the silly example in Superman, where his enemy is all about just trying to occupy more land, right? But it's actually a really deep aspect. In terms of on a deeper level, there was one time, in regular class for those in Raja Yoga, it was very eye-opening. It's like, we are very territorial. Like, if you come in and you change something because you wanted the table to be right there, and then someone else comes in the room, they don't like the table there and they'll move it somewhere else. And it's like, I've had this experience one time. I was in a room and we had the temperature. I'm sitting back there just doing the IT. We had the temperature like at whatever state. Someone comes in and they turn the temperature at a certain degrees. And then they sat down and someone else came in and turned the temperature at a different degrees. And then they sat down and a third person came in and turned the temperature to a different degree. And it's like, what is all of this about? It's like all about my preferences all the time, right? And this being critical is actually perhaps a very deep samskara of, I want things to be a certain way so that I can be okay. But it was quite interesting what Judy had been sharing about is that why, on a very subtle level, have we linked that I will feel okay when certain things are a certain way. That we are learning in the study that the dependency for things to be a certain way can be quite subtle. Which is why it's that interesting conversation we had quite a while ago about it's in the mundane moments where we really get to see, some of these little things, but it's not really about the little things. It's actually something deeper. It's like when I feel content, like nothing bothers us, right? So it's not really even about the little things. So it is very, very laborious if we had to just keep addressing, letting go of every little thing. It's actually back to this aspect of soul consciousness. It's like the feeling of my true self, that experience, and why we need to keep practicing to go into that experience so that it becomes an experience that we can go to in a second, right? And we really get to see when we are not actually, on, our spiritual core isn't on. It could be the tiniest little things that bother us. And this is a part that we didn't have a chance to chat with Judy because we're totally running out of time anyways. But to also be able to just begin to watch the reactivity, to be able to do that, that's really, really important. Because I think that if we don't and we keep judging ourselves, we're actually taking a couple of steps back every single time. That on a deeper level, it's something else. It's much more. It's actually that state of fullness. It's our real selves that we're really missing. I'm not sure if that, it's a very subtle topic.
Very deep, yeah. It's very, very deep, yeah.
Mm-hmm, it is.
Sometimes there are so many other vices connected to that as well, right? Because sometimes I think that, okay, so I'm criticizing because I don't do what they are doing. And because I'm not getting what they are getting. And then I said, no, but I don't want anything what they have. But then I said, then why I'm doing it? I mean, it's so like if the question go on round and round, right? So it's very deep and it's very subtle. And I know that it's all about being full, right? But then that's a journey, right? I mean, being full, it's just
It is
not.
definitely. And the homework that we actually had for today had a lot to do with that too.
Yeah, because I like that homework, today's
Yeah.
homework, surrendered
I know
mind.
many are like, what homework? But it's really about we often go into waste instead of really going into the value of the self. And what is this natural relationship between me and God, and what is my destiny? And that's a part of what your question is actually now we have developed attitudes. And what attitudes are, and it was beautiful that during morning class, one of the classes defining attitude as pattern of thinking is that when you see something a certain way all the time, you see it that way all the time, a certain perspective, then there's a whole slew of thoughts that come up all the time. So that could actually really be what's happening, is that it's just that there is just a habit now of these bunch of thoughts that come up in that certain situation. And feeling bad about it is not going to help. Starting to actually watch it is really, really, a step of mercy for oneself. Ego doesn't like it at all. Ego wants to shut it down or shut others down, but to actually start to watch that, and take small steps actually is very, very important. Ultimately, it is my awareness that needs to change, but I do want to be very careful, in terms of to really take that time to watch when those things come up, because ego is going to try to make you feel bad again and again every time it comes up, right? It's a step of courage to be able to maybe even expect it's going to come up again. But my intention is start to just observe what's going on. Usually what happens is that we react, and then we react to what we react. And then that just reinforces it as well.
Yeah, because it's very small. It's not a small thing. It's actually a big thing. People lie a lot in today's world even. And I can't even imagine, like everything is falling apart. And why you really have to lie so much? It's a big fat lie. And it's from the top till the bottom, right? I mean, everywhere, like right from vice president and right from the smallest of the smallest person working on offices and all. And you always wonder that why are they doing all this? And the lie, it's a lie. I mean, it's not any. I can't use any sophisticated word. I cannot replace lie with any other thing, because it's a lie. It's a flat lie. And then I don't know. It's just my capacity. I'm not capable to handle that, and then you don't say anything in their face, but like you always think that why are they doing all these things? Why are they doing this? But it's not my business. What are they doing? Right? That is something.
Take care, Pauline. Yeah. So yeah, I know. I think we need to wrap up pretty soon. But just one final thought I would say, and it's because it's based on personal experience, is that why it's actually very important that we develop this habit of practicing going into soul consciousness. The reason why is because when you're actually in that space, when you're actually in that experience and you're really feeling that real, that deep sense of peace, all questions really stop. Right? It really does. And I mean it because it's actually a power, right? Is that I also noticed that, yes, in the study, you are learning and some body of knowledge as well that helps you to see why the world is the way it is. But soul consciousness is still the basis, because the issue is that when there's still a feeling of discontentment inside, ego is going to be operating, and ego will not allow you to be able to see things in an understanding way. And so it'll always kind of keep coming up. It's going to find more and more reasons, and it's just only going to drain you even more. So in a way, it is actually an illusion, constantly distracting us, because ultimately in this study, you are letting go of this personality of who you are not, which is ego, right? And ego has been our best friend for a long time. For a reason, it has actually helped us to protect us, right? Because we didn't have a sense of self, right? But of course, it comes with a huge price. But because it has helped to protect us as well, this is why this whole being critical is actually because of ego. It is basically an altered personality, right? And that's why in the West, there's this lovely story about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but it's the story of basically a person who has an altered personality he can switch back to. Our altered personality, we actually took pride in it too. So we have valued this altered personality if we don't really know who ourselves is. But that altered personality is trying to protect things, to try to keep things okay. Things aren't okay, but trying to make things okay. And so it's the voice of that altered personality that's constantly very loud in our inner ear. And ultimately what it is, it's not even us, but until we gain a sensitivity to our real selves, that critical thinking, that critical speaking inside is going to sound very valid. Right? But at the depth of a soul who really values that, I would love to be able to be at peace no matter what. Like that is really appealing to us. But the voice of ego is so convincing that the sensitivity to the attractiveness that to be at peace with no matter what just doesn't sound as appealing. So it's totally understandable, right? And this is why, you know, when there are, you know, ideal times to just keep accumulating on this practice of soul consciousness, just like when you ask employees and you ask students we need to practice the fire drill when there is no fire. Right? And don't wait for the fire to come, the fire of ego, right? To come, the fire of blame inside or outside, because at that time, there is not going to be enough power. Okay. So we're going to have a little reflection, but that's a great question, because I feel that many really resonate with that too, grappling with that as well. So we'll have a brief reflection.
Sorry to Pauline, because of me, she just
No, she had to go. She had a client to see. So there's nothing you did at all. So, but thank you for those who join online, and great questions, Hema, because you know, it is about what is relevant, spiritually speaking, for souls, and how do I really apply what I'm learning. And so that's why we always invite souls to join the experience sessions, whether it's on site at the Northeast on Fridays or online, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays.
But the timings are not matching, right?
Yeah, and that's why they're recorded for souls as well. So they're available.
Sometimes I watch them later on, but lately I haven't.
Sounds good. So we'll have a little reflection. Deep in my heart, there's also a tiredness that develops when the timing is right. A tiredness of expending so much of my energy looking out there, knowing that at the end of the day, if I really ask my heart, at the end of the day, trying to change others really doesn't actually help me find what I'm looking for. And that's why having that honest conversation actually helps me to let go a little bit more. And to realize that what honors me to have manners of dignity, manners of respect for the self and others, a manner of not being affected, reactive, I need to look inside to discover the true sense of who I am. And trust that my true nature is one that isn't reactive, one that is light, one that is free. My true nature is of peace. So even water that first awareness, that first recognition that this is my true self. Maybe I can't feel it. Maybe I can't meet it right now. But to water that trust, that was my true self. That anytime I try so hard to have a certain character, or I try so hard to not be critical, or I become critical with myself, that all of that just drains me. To begin to watch my inner world and now and then touch that experience that I am a soul. I am separate from this body. And just that feeling that I'm a guest, keeping it so simple. Simple, but each time I go deeper. That is, the quality of that experience becomes more meaningful. And I surrender to that feeling of lightness and peace. And what I'm doing is actually medicine, because I'm feeling my true self, for that true nature to emerge. Om Shanti.